Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning and thank you all for attending. I totally appreciate people taking time this morning to do this. I'm David Plavin. I'm the Vice President of SOS Saco Bay, which is a nonpartisan interest-based advocacy group supporting efforts to combat the effects of the coastal erosion caused by the Saco River Jetty, and we're also working to help rehabilitate Saco Bay beaches. A couple of very quick thank yous to the City of Saco, Mayor Doyle, City Administrator Bryan Kaenrath, Emily Roy, the Director of Communications, and Andrew Dickinson for helping me put all this together. State Senator Donna Bailey, who's a co-host this morning, and Kevin Roche, the President of SOS Saco Bay. We have a pretty packed agenda. The Q&A pod is open and available. You can put questions in there. We'll try to get them answered best we can. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some discussion. So first up is Saco Mayor Bill Doyle. Bill, if you can unmute and speak, please do.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. And thank you very much and welcome everyone to the second symposium on this. And we're almost to the point where we can make this an annual event every year, annual symposium. But I do want to thank everybody for taking the time out of the day to talk about it and a very important issue for the city of Saco, an issue that I made front and center in my campaign for mayor. Is something that we need to get done. It's not something that we can continue to study and bypass anymore. This is something that needs to be forward and needs to be progressed over the next couple of years. So with that, we are working with many entities to try and get some resolution. And I think as part of that, these symposiums are helpful to not only look at other options that are out there and how those options can be combined to find a resolution that makes sense to everyone, but also to just engage every member of the public with an opportunity to find out what is going on. So again, thank you all. And I'm very excited about the opportunity to participate and the opportunity to hear different things that wouldn't come to me necessarily just by in the position of mayor or in the position of my current employment. So it's always good to learn. I think education is important and key. And so with that, I'm as a politician, I'm not going to stay up here and talk because as we know, politicians can speak forever. So I'm not going to monopolize the time frame. I just want to say thank you, welcome. And hopefully this is a little bit of learning for everybody. And Bryan will go over our efforts that we've had with the Army Corps. And again, thank you to all the sponsors that are here. And putting this together. So
thank you, Mayor Doyle. Our first presenter is Peter Slovinsky from the Maine Geologic Survey. Peter's a marine biologist who's spent a lot of time out here, is very familiar with what's going on, and he's going to give us an update from his latest findings. So Peter, go ahead, share your screen. You're up.
Great, thanks, David. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. Let's get this screen up. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm going to be giving you a quick 15-20 minute update. This is similar to an update I gave the Shoreline Commission back in fall of 2020. We don't have too much new information. Our surveying of beach shorelines and different things that I'll share with you here typically occurs in the summer and early fall. So we don't have any 2021 updates too much, but I will have a couple photos for you. So what I'm going to be covering, a lot of this information is available through what we call our Maine Beach Mapping Program, or MBMAP. And what I'll show you are some changes associated with what we call the vegetation line. So think of that as where the dune is positioned and how the dune has changed over time. The mean high water line is a contour basically just seaward of the beach, and following that shows us how the beach has been changing over time. The dry beach width is a distance between the mean high water line and the vegetation line or a seawall. So that's kind of your protective dry beach, and the average over time gives you an idea of what that's been doing over a period of years. And then we can provide some information on dry beach with changes. We've only been monitoring that for 2 years, or for a couple of years. And what we do is take the 2020 dry beach width and compare it to the 2019 dry beach width. Okay, so again, all that information is available on our website if you want to dig further into this. So these slides I'm going to share with you, they're oriented north-south. So north is on your left, south is on your right. So the jetty would be on your right, and Goose Fair Brook would be at the terminus on the northern end, on the left-hand side. And the colors you see here, yellows are kind of slight negative changes, pale greens to darker greens are positive changes, and oranges and reds, hopefully we won't be seeing too many reds, are negative changes. And the blue dashed line you see on here are the changes that we've observed through 2019. So in this case, dune changes from 2005 to 2019. And the color-coded changes you see here are the changes that include data through 2020. So areas where the bars go outside of the blue line on the negative side mean the changes are a little bit worse. And areas where you have the bars going above the line on the positive side mean those changes are a little bit better. So in terms of dune changes overall, you can see this general trend going from basically where the bulkhead wall ends right here along Ferry Beach Park. You can see, or Ferry Beach State Park is located right here at the start of this orange, and it's seeing some of our worst erosion rates in terms of dune changes. Looking at data from 2005 to 2020. You can see these trends are basically about the same. So the dune hasn't changed too much. There's a little bit of a decreased rate of dune change here as compared through 2019. But overall, they've been relatively stable and haven't changed too much in the past year. What has changed quite a bit are beach shoreline changes. From 2017 to 2020. And what you can see on the right-hand side of the image here is we had that, everybody knows, the beach nourishment in spring of 2019. And you can see the dashed line shows where the beach change was if we just went through the year 2019. And by the year 2020, you can see that there was a large amount of loss, still positive on the overall trend, but a large amount of loss, and then redistribution of those sands along the beach so that such that you have positive beach changes pretty much along the entire stretch of shoreline. And we'll dig into this a little bit more using aerial imagery and topography in a little bit. The average dry beach width, again, is kind of that protective width of beach. Anything above 25 to 50 feet is considered pretty good. And the nice thing I can report is that the average dry beach width did not drop too much. You can see when the nourishment redistributed to the north, it did drop a little bit compared to that rate from 2017 to 2019. There's a very, very narrow dry beach along the section of the shoreline that has a lot of riprap going up to near the bulkhead. And then once you get north of that, it grows and is pretty consistent between about 50 and 70, maybe 80 feet in width. That's pretty good. And in general, it's stayed about the same or grown a little bit. So that's a good sign. The dry beach width change from 2019 to 2020 again shows how the influence of that beach nourishment. So if we stopped and compared 2018 to 2019, you can see this is all positive growth right here where they put the sand. But including the year 2019 to 2020, it was all loss. So this is showing that all the sand in this location was distributed down the beach. The positive thing is if you look, the rest of this signal is pretty much all positive, okay? Except for a slight bit of a change right in this location right here, where it was about stable to just a slightly bit negative. But the nice thing is the rest of the entire beach grew. That's showing that nourishment sand was distributed down the beach all the way to Goose Fair Brook. Next, I want to speak with you about a project we just finished last year called, it was a NOAA-funded project of special merit. And what we did here is we combined bathymetric surveys using a jet ski powered survey system with offshore surveys done from a traditional lobster boat with drone surveys, which were done along the shoreline. Okay, if you combine all those things, you can create what we call a digital elevation model. This is what that looks like in the lower left, and then compare them over time. So this project started in 2018 and went through September 2020. And what I'm going to do is focus on Saco South and Saco North. And the way these are color coded is anything that's a pale red is indicating loss, and anything of the color of gray to blue is indicating gains. And some of these gains can be quite small. We're talking less than 20 centimeters. And areas where you see no color changes means that the change we observed was less than 10 centimeters. So less than plus or minus basically 4 inches, okay? So looking in the south from October 2018 when we started our surveys to March 2019. So what we did is we looked at fall and spring as much as possible. We missed a spring because of COVID. But from October 2018 to March 2019, you can see where the beach nourishment was placed. Lots of big blues indicating major changes where that sand went in. And you're starting to see some gains along the beach here and not, some losses along the lower portion of the beach profile as you go northwards near the state park, but some gains along this lower portion of the beach here. Not too much change along the upper beach, just a little bit of loss here. You can kind of see these crenulate shapes in here. But by the time we get to from March 2019 to that following fall, you can see that there was a lot of loss where the nourishment sand went in, and this was reflected by those graphs I showed you early, and then huge gains along the riprap area here, and very, very large gains, upward of about a meter in terms of elevation gains of the beach along this whole section right in here. Okay, as you can see, over time, this nourishment sand is starting to work its way northwards. We missed the spring of 2020 because of COVID. So our following survey was in September. So this is from October to September. So you're looking at about a year. You can see that there was beach loss now along this entire stretch, but solid gains, almost all gains through this entire area right here. So that's showing all of that nourishment sand over that period from spring of 2019 to September 2020 is now moving down the beach and benefiting this entire stretch of beach with significant gains of the beach. And what that looked like from an aerial standpoint, this was also shot from our drone that was flown by Nearview, a contractor that we work with, is prior to the nourishment, this is what the beach looked like. After the nourishment, you can really see where that sand was placed, the massive amount of beach growth. And the nice thing is you can see over the subsequent slides how this sediment disperses northwards. So it's flattened now here, but you can see these really big pockets of growth here. And by September 2020, this is all gone. So you went from this in October 2018, and by September 2020, it looks about the same. But as you'll see in subsequent slides, that benefited the rest of the beach system. So moving down the beach, this is the intersection of Island View Avenue is right here. This is the uncovered geotube, the end of the riprap. You can see how exposed the riprap is here in October 2018. By March of 2019, you can see beach growth occurring. The geotube is still uncovered, so the sand hasn't made its way up the profile, but you can see it's starting to be in the lower portion of the profile. Everybody saw those wood chips. You can see them in the image. And look how much now the riprap is covered by sand. The geotube is covered. The beach is now growing through here. And by September 2020, the riprap is still covered. The geotube is still covered pretty much except for one little spot. And then the sand is on the upper portion of the beach now, okay, instead of the lower portion of the beach. So the sand has moved up the profile where we want it to be in that protective area of the beach. What that looks like from the ground, October 2018, these are all about in the same spot. They're not all perfect, but you can see this is March 2019. The geotube is really exposed. October 2019, it's almost all covered, and you can see the wider beach with the sand in here. And this is what we want to see. September 2020, a nice wide beach sand all along here. That's very protective. And I was able to get out and take a February 2021 picture. You can see a lot of the sand is now getting chewed away that was in this area. The geotube is still covered for the most part, but you can kind of see how the elevation of the sand is pushed into this area here. So this was right after a nor'easter. Looking northwards now along the beach, this is the dune along Ferry Beach Homeowners Association. And this is October, March, October of 2019, and September 2020. Again, you can really see that wide beach here by September. So that sand, again, is being distributed down the beach. And by February, this again is right after a nor'easter. This got started to get chewed up. So moving to the northern end of the beach, October 2018 to March 2019, there's some beach loss occurring in front of the seawall associated with the string of properties right here. There's a lot of complex patterns going on as you get closer to Goosefair Brook in terms of what we call the low tide terrace. That's this area down here where you see these gains. There's upper beach loss that's occurring here, but let's see how that changes over time. So moving to 2019 October, there's gains now in those areas where we saw losses, but losses in the lower portion of the profile. So very complex patterns occurring down here associated with the way Goosefair Brook kind of drains and the movement of sand through these areas. And by September 2020, you can see some slight gains in the offshore through this area. But the key is, again, upper beach gains, where that protective portion of the beach really, really, really gained a lot of sand. Okay, we're talking 1.2 to 1.4 meters, so 3 to 4 feet of sand, actually, in terms of gains along this stretch of beach here. What that looked like, again, from aerials, it's a little harder to pick out. One of the easiest things to watch is how this spit changes at Goosefair Brook, but we're more interested in what's happening with the beach here. You can see the spit was lost. There's some gains in the low tide terrace. It became wider. See how this water came all the way up to the beach here. The low tide terrace here gained sand. And by October 2019, there's some losses, but some gains along the beach. Some growth of this spit again, meaning sand is making its way up the beach and growing into the spit. And September 2020, there's been beach growth and a nice low tide terrace out here. So this is showing that you've got some nice protective beach in front of the homes in this area. What that looked like from the ground, this is October 2018. This house is what I've used for reference here. March 2019, you can see some changes to the beach. October 2019. And September 2020, there's some sand on the upper portion of the beach, and then you've got this nice wide berm that gets overtopped with waves, but you can see how wide this is now all the way out to here. So that's showing that benefit from the nourishment sands. You can read more about this project in a report that we published at this location here, and I gave a copy of this presentation to David and Andrew. They can share it as needed, so folks listening can dig deeper into this if you'd like to. And I want to finish just showing you very, very quickly what I think is a very good success story for the area, where we took an area that had very, very high erosion rates. This dune in this area is eroding at a rate of about 2 to 3 feet per year. And this, I think, is a success story because it's a dynamic eroding system. But what happened is this dune system was overwashed and eroded very badly in the Patriots Day storm of 2007. And working with the Park Association, the idea here was the traditional way of thinking about restoring dunes is to rebuild that frontal dune and put it back in here and have that hold the line. We knew that wasn't going to work here. So what we wanted to do is beneficially reuse the overwash that you see here from the storm and build on that. So the design was to build a secondary dune ridge in this area because you have the room, and leave this area here to be sacrificial. So that's exactly what happened. Sand was trucked in. This secondary dune ridge was built. This is in March 2009, right after the sand was put in place. By December, look at how beautiful this dune is. And this has performed markedly well given that erosion rate. So this is it over time. June 2015, you can see all this dune grass is very well developed. February 2019, some erosion of the dune occurred. September 2020, that dune is still holding pretty well. And most recently, February 2021, you can see that there is erosion now that has cut into that frontal dune ridge, but this back dune ridge is still providing the protection it's supposed to. You can read more. This was actually highlighted in a case study for living shorelines in a report put together by the Nature Conservancy that we helped with for the 5 New England states on showcasing how living shorelines can work in New England. And this Ferry Beach, Saco, Maine was a case study for this. So you can read more about that at this link here if you'd like to. And then, so what are my take-home points? So the first is that dune restoration project, which cost less than $30,000, is still functioning. It's still working. It's doing what it's supposed to. From a longer term standpoint, the dunes have been relatively stable from 2019 to 2020, and I think part of that is due to the beach nourishment that occurred in spring 2019. As we know from the images I showed you and probably from walking the beach, putting that sand on the beach has immediate impact to the area of where that sand is placed, but it was lost pretty rapidly in the placement area. But the good thing is that sand redistributed along the entire beach and gave the beach basically a year of very, very good protection. It took about a year and a half for that sand to distribute all the way up to Goose Fair Brook from the time it was placed. And it's a little bit unclear to us why there was some small gains in the offshore, and we think it might have to do with the way hurricane swells kind of reworked some of that nourishment sand and moved it off of the low tide terrace seaward, but also put it up on top of the beach because of the long period swell waves. But regardless of what was the cause, there's a positive finding. And certainly, we're going to keep track of what's going on through our Maine Beach mapping program, and also through our survey program that uses the jet ski to keep an idea of what's going on at this location. So we have a better understanding how the dune restoration project is faring and how future beach nourishment projects might fare and how that sand might be placed and optimized. So that's what I have for you, and happy to take any questions or however we want to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it. I think we'll try and get through the presentations, and then at the end, we will open it up and have a discussion. And if anybody has questions, you can ask them then. Our next speakers are Bryan Kaenrath, the city administrator of the city of Saco, and Kevin Roche, president of SOS Saco Bay. They're going to give us an update as to where we stand in trying to get the Army Corps of Engineers to get here and help us. So go ahead, Bryan, or Kevin, whoever's going to go first.
Kevin, you wanted the city to go first? Is that okay? Or yeah, okay. Thank you to SOS Saco Bay, obviously, for putting this on. And it's a partnership that we really value with the city, and we're all working on a common goal here, so we value the partnership and trying to move this forward. But let me just give a couple quick points on where we've been and where we're going with the Army Corps. As the mayor said at the beginning, when Bill and I came in beginning of last year with the new council, one of our top priorities has been to re-engage on this issue and see if we can make some forward progress, because there obviously had been some fits and starts with this over the past number of years. And we do want to make sure there is a concerted effort to push this forward at this point to try to make some headway here. So beginning of last year, we reached out again to our congressional delegation, and I just want to thank the staff of Senator Collins, King, as well as Congresswoman Pingree, Alex, Bonnie, and Pam for their assistance in all this and the discussions they've had with us. They've been invaluable in this whole process, so thank you to them. But so we began discussions with them. We had some meetings with the Army Corps early on, and the result of that basically was we were able to get before the council last September 14th, a new letter of support passed through the council that went to the Army Corps. So they received that letter of support. In the months after, we got word back that there may be some elements of the letter that were not adequate for the Army Corps. And we did receive a response just a few weeks ago, officially on February 25th, that there are in fact points in our letter that are, deemed necessary but absent. And they are recommending a new revised letter to be put through the council and sent to them in order to get to the project partnership phase. So I'll just tell you what clearly, those points are that the Army Corps is looking for. And we have a new letter drafted that will be going back to the City Council on April 5th for consideration, hopefully passage. But in a nutshell, those points are must state that the sponsor has reviewed for Saco Camp Ellis. The letter should acknowledge that the recommended plan, Plan 6, has been further modified to recommend a federally implementable plan that has reduced beach fill volume to keep the total project cost below the 26.9 million federal limit, as in the WRDA WRDA bill of 2007. The letter also must state the sponsor understands its role and responsibilities as set forth in the report, and in this specific case, citing the following sponsor responsibilities. And this has been the big sticking point in the past, some of this with the city. So paying any project costs above the 26.9 million federal project limit, that must be included in the letter. Assuming responsibility for future operation, maintenance, repair, rehabilitation, and replacement of the project. And also hold and save the government free from all damages arising from design, construction, operation, and maintenance of the project, except for damages due to the fault or negligence of the government or its contractors. And we also must include an executed non-federal sponsor self-certification of financial capability
Ryan, you're freezing up a little bit.
with that. So this has been some of the controversial things that, we've, David, did you have, sorry. Merely established a cost limit of the project 26.9 million. And if this project were to be authorized, that would happen after there was an approved report and just prior to approval from Army Corps headquarters to execute a PPA. So no funds, and they want to be very clear about this, no funds have yet been allocated for implementation of this project. Any allocation of the funds to implement design and construction of the project would not be made available until after a PPA was signed. So that was all basically the contents of their letter they sent to us on February 25th. So again, we're going to have a revised letter inclusive of all of these points going to the council on April 5th for their consideration. We hope for a positive outcome, but these are some of the sticking points that we've dealt with in the past. So once that happens, just to give you a little overview of where it goes from there, what the next steps are. So upon receiving the letter from Saco, the Army Corps District would need to ask for the project to be reinitiated. Once reinitiated, the Army Corps District would then request funds to update the plan and estimates to current price levels and resubmit for review and approval. Once the report is approved, and not before then, can they start the process of putting together a PPA, which is where we actually get to the point of we would discuss and negotiate a project partnership agreement. And once they have a PPA drafted, they will need a second letter of support from the city of Saco and a second signed financial certification form that would commit Saco to the role of the project at that point. So that in a nutshell is where we are and where we're going. So the big next step clearly is the April 5th council meeting, where we're going to be considering the new letter inclusive of all those requirements the Army Corps is setting forth. And obviously the goal with all of this is to get to the project partnership phase where we can really talk about putting this project together. So I will say, I think there's been some forward momentum. Obviously, it seems to have ebbed and flowed a bit, but we seem to be back on track. Again, I'd just like to thank our congressional delegation, and we'll see what the council does on April 5th. I think we still have a bit of a process and a road ahead of us, but we are making progress. And I will just say on behalf of the city, at least Bill and myself, that we are all in and all committed to doing something here. This has been talked about for a long time. We've been, I think, doing lots of talking. We've had some action, but we really want to see rubber hit the road at some point in the near future. So we are not giving up on this. We're going to keep pushing this forward and advancing this and make some headway. And, this could also include other options that I think you'll hear about more in this meeting, including some of the natural barriers. We had a good presentation a few weeks ago. And other things we can do to mitigate erosion here. But obviously the Army Corps Option 6 project has been a front and center throughout most of this conversation. And we intend to pursue that as far as we can pursue it. So that's where we are for the city. And I'll turn it over, I think, now to Kevin for the SOS perspective.
Thanks, Brian. For some might not know, SOS Saco Bay reformed in 2019 from many decades in the past after another Army Corps project stalling efforts from 2019. We are a nonpartisan, interest-based advocacy group on shoreline issues in Saco Bay. We are acting as a conduit between private citizens and public officials. The main focus here is to empower citizens to take action that will influence these decisions. We may request studies if information is lacking, but we do not undertake them. We do not make policy, but we will comment on it, as Brian and I think the mayor know from us. We do not initiate legal action, but we will support and report on citizen-led lawsuits. We also do not endorse political candidates, but we will call out those who support us and be critical of those whose policies are counter to our aims. The city of Saco has been a great partner, especially recently. As Brian alluded to, when our new mayor and the current council started in 2020, the top 2 goals of the city were best practices to promote economic development, land use, and to implement measures for environmental sustainability to mitigate the effects of coastal erosion. Never before has our shoreline been such a top environmental and economic priority to the city. Last year, we didn't have many meetings as SOS Saco Bay because COVID came, but brought to the forefront our beaches as the #1 city and area resource. We had record traffic April through the summer, and a dwindling beach and parking congested. It was all the issues that we talked about. We had specifically in Saco, traffic committee meetings and whatnot. Last June, so we have our own correspondence with the Army Corps, and as Brian alluded to, they're going to have more issues that we always have to deal with. So we are on them just as much as government is as well. Last June, SOS got a letter back from the Army Corps General, the same general who promised Senator King that the Camp Ellis situation would be resolved during his 2018 nomination. He clearly stated that although the city was provided the Army Corps examples of project partnership agreement, the PPAs, given the unique nature of this project, a specific agreement, once we get it back, would need to be drafted for Saco. So we are not a cookie cutter project here. We are very unique. We await the PPA, as Brian mentioned, to lay out working with the Army Corps from the needed letter of support by the city. And hopefully the city can get that off on April 5th. But SOS Saco Bay does not stop with just the Army Corps. We bring forth ideas and support all efforts, as you will hear today, to mitigate shoreline damage. We believe that that some of these proposals can actually be incorporated into Plan 6 in the PPA negotiation or after it's approved. It's gonna, as you'll learn, I think it could save money and liability to the city. And we just don't rely on the city either for support. So if Lynn is available, I would like to hand this off to our state rep, Lynn Copeland, and her legislative efforts at the state level. Is she on? Oh, you got to unmute.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everybody, for your attention to this really important thing that affects every one of us in Saco. I just put in the chat a link to a legislative bill that hasn't come to committee yet. And as soon as it does, I'll let you know. But the intent was to go in every direction possible to try and get this PPA out here. So one of their objections, the Army Corps' objections, was that the letter, they needed someone to be a non-federal sponsor, and they want the city to be the non-federal sponsor. But those gears move slowly. And so cloture was coming, and I put in this bill. So in case the Army Corps would be in favor of it, that the state would be the non-federal sponsor. So the bill is in. It can be changed. So if the Army Corps does not permit the state to be the non-federal sponsor, I can see what language we can get going so that the state could have an arrangement with the city to back up the city on that. Because I know the issue is that the state has deeper pockets. I know that we don't expect to go over the amount of the 26.9 million. And so I understand the that is what this letter needs to say. That's what the non-federal sponsor is all about, is for basically guaranteeing any overage. So to move that onto the state's responsibility, considering that they get sales tax generated from a lot of the vacationers who stay here, and also because of the Ferry Beach State Park. So they really do have, we as a state really do have a stake in this. And certainly considering that it's a federal state river, a federal channel, and the city of Saco has been, literally shoring up the shore for decades, it's time that that burden get taken off of the residents of the city of Saco. So that's where I'm at. So I would like to know from the federal delegation here. I've heard that the Army Corps won't consider that, but I haven't seen anything in writing, and I don't know if you've seen a copy of my bill, so that's why I have it here. I would like to know via email or a letter if this path, having the state become the non-federal sponsor, is in fact a possibility or not. So I would ask that action of the federal delegates, please.
Lynn, this is Alex from Senator
Yeah.
Flannelly's office. If you want a response to that, I'm more than happy to send that along to the Army Corps. If you want to put it in writing and write a letter,
I'll put it on my
to me, you have my email, I'm sure, from when you were a city councilor.
you remember me.
And then we have no problem sending that along and getting a response for you.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So that's my time. Thank you for it.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Alex. Okay, the next presentation is going to come from Rick Millard. Rick is the chairman of the City of Saco Shoreline Commission, and he's going to talk about a plan for dredging. Go ahead, Rick. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Am I sharing yet? Not yet. There we are. This is going to just take Peter's presentation and take it just a little bit farther. The good work that was done there really is going to augment what I'm going to talk about. So most of Maine's sand beaches are located between York and Cumberland counties. There's one or two beaches outside of that, the northernmost being Sand Beach, which is really a shell beach and not a sand beach. But the important point is that they're all eroding. and they require replenishment, mostly at different levels, some more critical than others. Dry beach availability is an important economic asset for the area. Just the coastal communities within York County get approximately $500 million per summer in this area. And I'll give you numbers and show you where I came up with that. So Camp Ellis, the Ferry Beach area, they're the ones that are eroding the most quickly, with the exception of the augmentation that we got from the dredge last 2 years ago. We've been working on this project for more than 50 years. We have moved forward in fits and starts. We have a tentative plan that's in place. We just need to push it over the top and get something moving forward as far as the resolution. But until that happens, because things move very slowly, having some dredge spoils or just sand augmentation for the beach is really important and will help maintain that dry beach area that continues to attract the summer vacationers. Now, Scarborough has just the opposite problem with the accretion that happens on their end. And they're seeing about $1 million a year for their budget. And Scarborough is not a federal channel, so that comes right out of the bottom line for the city. These are the 24 beaches that exist between South Portland and York. You're all familiar with them in one way or another, and the state has gone through, reviewed all of them, and prioritized them as far as their erosion criticality and the need for replenishment. I took a look to try to assess and quantify what the summer revenue really was for this area. And I looked at the state economic data from 2016 to 2020. I defined winter as being November, December, January, and February, and used those dollars to say, these are the people who live here. They're going to contribute year round. Then I took the months of June, July, August, and September, and the revenue from those months represented the total expenditures during the summers. When you subtract the two, you get just what is provided by the tourist component to the communities, to the coastal communities. And as you can see, it runs $500 million, with the exception of the 1920 year, which was due to COVID, was down by 50%. We just had Ogunquit listed as one of the top US beaches, particularly on the East Coast. And with Saco spending $250,000 a year for beach maintenance, and if you look at a $1.5 million dredge cost, simply divide that out. The simple back of the envelope type payback is 6 years. Scarborough with their $1 million budgeting for dredging to keep the Scarborough River open, a year and a half. So there seems to be plenty of justification and reasonable payback to have a county or a state, a city, county, state level protection for the income stream that we're seeing from vacationers. When you look at the problems that we're having with the erosion and so on, working with the Corps, we've got a couple of things that we can do. One of them, obviously, do nothing. We'll have continued erosion on the beaches, an increasing loss of income in southern Maine as the beaches become less attractive and more narrow, and no nourishment until the Corps comes in, well, in the Camp Ellis area, no nourishment until the Corps dredges the river again. Another option is a Cutterhead Dredge, $1.5 million initial investment, 2-person crew with training and maintenance. Dredging can be scheduled at either the local, county, or even at the state level. Unfortunately, a Cutterhead is not suitable for other than sand and gravel beaches. The cobble beaches up north really require a mechanical dredge. The difficulty with the mechanical dredges are there are more pieces. There's a positioning tug, an excavator, a barge, and a scow to put the spoils in. All of those are additional costs and are significantly more than the $1.5 million that would be involved with a Cutterhead dredge. So that would, however, be usable in all Maine harbors. This is a picture of a Cutterhead dredge. I've got the specs for it later on. It dredges down to 22 feet. Again, 2-person crew, and it will pump sand 5,000 feet. It gives us local control, so we're not dependent on the Corps to come in and do any dredging. That includes Saco as well as any of the other beaches. Saco is the only federal channel, with the exception of the division. Oh God, what's the name of the river? That divides Maine and New Hampshire. We can regularly support beach nourishment with our own control. We need an initial permit from the Department of Environmental Protection, but once we have that permit, we are able to, by permit by rule, as part of the regulations, able to do periodic maintenance and dredging. The local restrictions for dredging are less stringent than the U.S. The Army Corps of Engineers, so we can do it more cheaply than they. So with regular addition to the sand and to the local beaches, we can hopefully see the positive results that Peter talked about earlier. This also allows management on a bay level of the materials that are in movement within the different coastal systems. And this way we can get benefits for all of the Maine coastal beaches, and it'll be advantageous economically to all of the areas. It may even provide additional mooring and pier fees. If you take a look at the cost, I looked at 25, 50, and 75% utilization over the course of the winter dredge season, which goes from the mid-November to mid-March. So it's 21 weeks, I believe, total. Looking at 100% usage is not realistic. So at $1.5 million, when you try and amortize that yearly, it's $191,000. So, and that breaks down to $955 an hour. The fuel, it's there, $40 an hour, insurance, $2 an hour. 2 persons, $60 an hour. That seemed like a going rate for me. The information that I got from Versi-Dredge was much less. I didn't deem it appropriate. So I put in a figure that I thought was something that was more realistic. The other numbers are theirs. The fuel, the maintenance filters, the periodic machine overhaul, Cutterhead wear, hull maintenance. And it comes out to a total of those different costs per hour, $1,131, $610, and $475. Obviously, mostly the costs are related to the usage. The machine will pump 260 cubic yards in an hour. So for that 25% utilization, we can put 52,000 cubic yards of sand on the beach. At 50%, more than 100, and at 75%, almost 170,000 cubic yards. As a point of reference, the last dredge that Peter talked about was 68,000 cubic yards. You can see the cost of operation, I beg your pardon. You can see the period cost of operation and the cost per cubic yard, which is significantly less than you'd see anything from the Corps. If you want to set yourself up for a project to do, I don't know, Saco River Narrows or whatever, the dredge is trailer transportable, so you would need to bring it and launch it at a local boat ramp that could be done by your own crew. You'd need DEP permits, which would be $40,000 worst case. It'll take 2 days to set up the machine and the pumping. And if you went 5 weeks for 25 weeks of usage, 52,000 yards, you'd come out with a little, it would spend $226,000. If the Corps was to perform the same project, it would be over $1 million. So you've got a savings of over $800,000. These typically work at a bond. So basically more breakdown as far as the costs are concerned. And you look at the payback less than a year when you're out at 75%. So these are the specs for the Cutterhead. It's self-propelled, 2-man crew. They were, for the financial reasons, I used a whole year of salary, not just the time of use. So that would be time that would be available for other projects outside the dredging window. And the way forward, it would make sense that this would be a state asset administered by a state level committee, acquired through state funds and administered by through the state. It could also be done at the county level, and actually some discussion has taken place as far as that activity has been considered. But I have absolutely no idea what the results of the discussion were. And I didn't seem to be able to find any information. Or it can be done locally. Obviously, having something at the county or state level would be preferred and would be more beneficial to a larger portion of the population. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Mayor Doyle, would you like to say anything about the dredging? I know you've talked about it in the past.
Thank you, Dave. Excuse me. Thank you, David. Yes, dredging is an important piece, and I want to thank Saco Shoreline Commission Chair Rick Millard for all of his work in putting the presentation together. And I believe at the last symposium, there was a discussion about a regional dredge approach coming out of the state, and that was something we were kind of waiting on before launching into a discussion with SMPDC about revisiting their 2017 dredge report that is on the City of Saco's website. So still looking to get an update out of the state about that regional, I believe it was regional county dredge program that was coming down. And I think State Representative Gremlich was working on that, and also said that there was also a grant program opportunity for beach nourishment that was also being worked on up at the state, and that Saco could be, could apply for. So those are all things that are important. But I think ongoing, the Saco Bay, as well as all of the state of Maine, really needs to look at an ongoing dredge program for all the waterways to combat beach erosion. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Our next speakers are both familiar with Living Shorelines. Living Shorelines is something that we became familiar with during the past 6-9 months. Both Scott Bartkowski and Pete Hanrahan are going to speak to it. Scott is the president of Living Shorelines Incorporated. Pete is a works in Maine. He has his own company, and he's also implemented some living shorelines solutions. And living shorelines is something that we have taken great interest in, especially since the idea of hard structures is one that's falling out of favor, and more modern technologies are something that we want to look at. So, Scott?
David, not to interrupt, sorry, excuse me, State Senator Bailey has her hand up. And she might be able to provide some insight as to what I was discussing. So, and my
Go ahead.
apologies, State Senator Bailey, for referring to the wrong title.
That's fine. I don't mind. I just wanted to make two comments on the dredge issue that occurred to me as Rick was giving his presentation. And both of these, I think, would need some input, monitoring, feedback, whatever, from the federal delegation. The first is, as most of you, I'm sure, are aware, the counties are going to be receiving, hopefully, a substantial infusion of monies from the ARP, the American Rescue Plan. And so this may in fact be an opportune time to pursue a dredge project at the county level, as they may have funds to be able to handle that. Now, of course, we are still waiting for the money. We're still waiting for federal guidelines. But I think that's something to put in your radar and for folks to be talking to your county commissioners, for example. And then the second question I would just have that the federal delegation may be able to look into is if we do a regional dredge, whether it's the county level or the state level, are we entitled to get any money from the Army Corps of Engineers, because we would be in fact fulfilling and relieving them of their obligation to dredge the Saco River? So I would just like to have that question answered. So those are my two thoughts. Thank you.
Apologies, Donna, and thank you.
David, do you mind if I just answer that second question?
No, not at all. Please
and
do.
Bonnie, you can, I see that you popped in, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on your the second question that you had, I think if there was a regional dredge that was purchased at the county level, what have you, and the local communities were dredging themselves, I don't think that they could get money from the Army Corps to dredge. But I think we had received an answer back from Army Corps saying that they could still, in the long run, have Army Corps do a dredge themselves, but that they couldn't take money from Army Corps to do their own dredge, if that makes sense.
I just want to add to you, Alex, I believe that's correct, because obviously this issue has been raised. And we also looked at communities in Massachusetts that banded together and bought their own dredge to take care of their area. And of course, they had looked at the possibility, if you will, of getting some kind of reimbursement from Army Corps. And that, to our knowledge, that absolutely is not something that can be done. However, it does not deter the Army Corps from stepping in if or when something is needed that's probably more costly or on a greater scale or whatever. They won't turn their backs on the communities because they have their own dredge equipment, but they won't subsidize.
Yeah, it won't make them ineligible for future Army Corps involvement. It would just, Army Corps would not be able to pay for any dredge that the communities did on their own.
So if I could just ask the question, so are you aware of any instances where there's been a regional or local dredge and the Army Corps is responsible for dredging a river, that the Army Corps then hires the local dredge to do that project when they're required to do it?
Not to my knowledge that's happened. I don't know. I know the communities in Massachusetts that Bonnie is talking about, I don't think that they've asked Army Corps to dredge since they purchased their own, to my
Mm.
knowledge. So I don't know that that's ever come up.
Thank you. Are you aware of anything that would prevent the Army Corps from hiring the local dredge? If you,
One stipulation that has been made at dredge meetings is that Army Corps must look to get bids from certified, those who are certified to meet the Army Corps specifications. Whether the county or municipal dredge team would meet those stipulations and could bid, that's something I don't know the answer to.
Go ahead, Rick.
That would also require the Corps to have a sole source justification to route the money to that particular organization. So that is, it can be a difficult row to hoe.
Okay, we have to
David?
move on.
David, just quickest of things, going back to the county, as SOS Saco Bay, we want to make sure that the entire Saco Bay, if the best route is to get county funds, as we all know, Scarborough is not in York County. I want to make sure that you know, somehow there's an avenue, Cumberland County, whatever, to also include Scarborough as well. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So next is Scott Bartkowski from Living Shorelines. Thank you for your patience, Scott, and unmute and share your screen and you can present.
Okay, does everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Great. Appreciate the opportunity to present you all this morning. I'm down here in sunny Pensacola, Florida, so if you hear a loud noise, it's a Blue Angels practicing over my house. So I think they were supposed to take off about 2 minutes ago. I wanted to introduce you to Living Shoreline Solutions. We've been around for about 24 years now, and we have about 100% success rate on all our projects. And what we did was, many years ago, we looked at what is disappearing around the country and around the world, and that's the barrier reef systems. And barrier reef systems are purpose is to protect shorelines, protect barrier islands, protect the mainland, and also provide essential fish habitat. So one of the ways we looked at doing this was to design a system that was going to be an artificial reef that would be stable, durable, and productive, and produce the corals, produce the essential fish habitat, and be there for the long term and turn into a natural barrier reef system after a period of time. So we designed a three-sided pyramid made out of 5,000 PSI marine grade concrete, placed them in the water throughout the world essentially, and monitored for a period of 6 years. And what we found was that they were stable. They would stay in place even with hurricanes. They're not anchored down. They're hollow but very stable. They've gone through wave tank testing, and they don't move through hurricanes. They also have a productivity rate of about 0.5 metric ton of marine biomass on an annual basis per square meter of surface area. Once we established that as a productive artificial reef that would turn into a natural reef, we then went into site-specifically modeling a system that would protect and restore coastal zones by having these systems placed parallel to the beach in a double row. And what happens when these units are placed out there, they disperse the wave energy instead of refract it. And we call them a wave attenuation device. And the reason they're called a wave attenuation device is because that's exactly what they do. We've used them for barrier reef systems throughout the world for oyster habitat. They're 37% more productive than any oyster habitat in the state of Alabama. We've used them for seagrass and mangrove restoration, obviously the essential fish habitat. And we've maintained the ability to naturally restore shorelines and onshore sand dune restoration and infrastructure protection. So how do these things work? Well, as you can see, I'm holding up my hand. This is a small model. It's a 3-sided pyramid. It's got 5 openings on one side, on each side, and a hole in the top. And what happens is as wave energy impacts that side, if you look at the picture on the top left side here, as it hits this side with 5 holes, those holes are tapered inwardly. And that allows the velocity to increase and the pressure to decrease of that wave energy. When it comes out the back 2 sides, it's coming out 10 holes, and those are tapered outwardly. So that decreases the velocity twofold and drops the pressure, increases the pressure. And then it goes through a second row of arrays where the same thing happens. And what you allow the energy to do is it actually transmits through the wad. So it goes through it instead of hitting a hardened surface where it's refracted and reflected away, it damages adjacent shorelines. This is exactly what you get. You can see down here in the bottom right as the waves are coming along shore, they hit the front row. There's all this disruption in between, and then it's relatively calm back over on this side. And you can see up here where it's still rough, it's making its way to shore. That's where the wads aren't. The wads start right about here. We're just putting this array in down in Louisiana. This was a couple years ago. So what happens is when you decrease that wave energy, if you think about stirring a glass of iced tea with sugar in it, you get it all rough on this side with that stirring. The sugar is suspended in the tea. As soon as you stop stirring, that sediment falls out, or the sugar falls out and ends up at the bottom of the glass, or in this case, shoreward of the wads. This is a conventional breakwater that you most commonly see. And what it does is because it's a hardened structure, it refracts and reflects wave energy around the system, and it causes it to scour out in this area. And eventually these, which are artificially renourished on a regular basis, these end up disappearing as well. So they're completely useless, and they serve no essential fish habitat benefits for the environment. When you put a wad array in, and this is a segmented wad breakwater, you can see here that the accretion comes all the way out from the beach all the way to the wads themselves. And this little scour area in here is because you are going to have some wraparound when these things are not continuous. And this was recommended to be a continuous array, but the client wanted to cover when this is Audubon Society down in Sunken Island, Tampa Bay. It's a bird sanctuary. They had a very limited budget, but this area was eroding, as I'll show you. But you can see that the wad arrays are accreting sand all the way out to the system. What's the process? How do we figure out something that's going to solve a solution? Typically, a client will contact us and display their, discuss their problems. We'll look at a list of objectives that they're trying to acquire. And then what we'll do is we'll go out and do surveys, geotechnical analysis, wind and wave analysis, and then we'll site specifically model those conditions using the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers CMS wave model. And we'll develop 3 or 4 different options for the client to select from based on varying degrees. And our target is about 80 to 90% wave attenuation. Once they decide which way to go, we will then engineer the wad itself and then a steel form to get that product. And these are pretty expensive forms because you need them to make a perfect product that meets the engineering specs that we design. Those forms are then shipped to a close site, manufacturing site, where we'll use local labor and we'll manufacture the units themselves. And this is a corrugated wad we used for a test site on one project. You'll see some wads down here for a project, Green Shores, with riprap on top of them. So it looks like the original part of the project. And then what we'll do is we'll hire local contractors who manufacture them, and then we'll deploy them. Here are those ones from Project Green Shores. They look like riprap on top. Very successful. Here are low profile wads that the client wanted up in Chesapeake Bay. We can actually round them and color dye them so that they come out less visible to the client, or we submerge them. This is Audubon Sunken Island Bird Sanctuary down in Tampa Bay. This has been about a 10-year project. It's a 75-year-old man-made island, so the geotechnical conditions are horrible. And there's severe erosion all along the north side of the area. And this was the first area that we did for the project site. And we went in and designed the system. After modeling it, it came out with several arrays that you see here with the engineering firm that we used. We manufactured the units on site and deployed them with a local manufacturer, deployment contractor, placed them in the water, and then monitored for a few years. And there you can see the backside, all these dead trees where all the erosion's taking place. So after a period of a few months, we put these things in. You can see at 2012 at low tide, you can start seeing some accretion back behind the units. The reason we had those gaps is because the client wanted them, as well as because of you wanted access for turtle nesting and manatees to get behind them. 9 months after installation, we had Tropical Storm Debbie come through, and you can see how much they accreted. They love rough weather because the offshore waves pick up that offshore sand, bring it towards the beach, and it hits the wads and it gets deposited. So that was after one storm. That's how quickly that happened. This is a progression of events from 1995 through to 2012. You can see in 2010, when we first started doing surveys and permitting, you've lost most of this west side of the island. Here in 2012, we started getting it back. That's after 4 months in place. You had over 10,000 cubic meters of sand accrete behind the waterways. This is the overall project. This is Bird Island here. This is Sunken Island. This is where we first started. This past January, we just finished this entire area all the way to the side of Bird Island. And we put very small gaps in them. You can see that's about every 500 feet. We put a small gap in. And those units will be accreting. You can go to our Facebook page and you can see the video on that, which is a mini documentary on how that project went, how successful it's been. I'm going to zip through these pretty quickly. This is a project off of Negril, Jamaica. The inset picture is a picture of the day we deployed the units. Okay, so you can see the water line here is right at this scarp. Okay, we had a Google satellite went over 39 days after we put the units in on June 30th, 2009, and we could measure how much sand had accreted. This inset picture is a wider shot from here at the edge of the pool, and you can see that we got over 60 feet of accretion in that short period of time. Farther up towards the main house, I'm on the inset picture. You can see where the water line is at the grape tree. We're about four feet from the foundation of the house. We gained 65 feet. Up at the grape tree, we gained 55 feet. Again, this is all in 39 days, and so on all the way up the area. In 2012, after 10 months of these units being in, you can see the house, we've accreted all the way out to the waterways. So what the homeowner decided to do, John Issa from Super Clubs up there in Negril, Jamaica, he said, Scott, let's go ahead and take these out and put them 15 meters seaward, where they're completely submerged and there are natural barrier reef protecting all of this. The interesting thing was that NEPA, who's our equivalent of DEP, said, we've never put these in before, but like hardened structures, we're concerned that they're going to have a negative effect on the surrounding real estate. So we had to monitor 200 meters to the north and 200 meters to the south. And actually everybody gained 4 feet of beach, 4 meters of beach, north and south. So there was no negative effect because the wads, instead of refracting, they attenuate the wave energy. This is a Hotel NH in Cancun, Mexico. These are submerged barrier reefs. We didn't put them above like we usually do. They wanted to go ahead and get a head start on having a snorkel beach areas for everybody to go to. And you can see the severe erosion here in 2010. And then what happened a year later, we got the beach back. This is Chenier Al Tigre. This is after 3 months. You can see accretion all the way behind the units. These units are about 500 to 700 feet off the shoreline. These units are only 3.5 feet tall. If you go onto Facebook, you'll see a drone go over after the hurricanes that came through this summer. And this area, with the storm surge, survived. The area just out to the south here, you'll see in the drone, got completely destroyed. And we're now in the process of waiting for a notice to proceed on continuing this wad array further south. This is your wad arrays up in Cape Charles, Virginia. You can see they've lost the tumblos back here. This one's about ready to go. And these were artificially renourished. And we put the wad arrays down in here. The expense on these things was incredible. So they came to us for a solution, which is a lot more beneficial. September 2012, you can see the wads when they were placed in. 3 years later, you can see how much accretion we've gotten out to the wads themselves. Okay, so pretty amazing. This was a project down Louisiana. It was a design build 3-year project to determine a system that could be placed without disappearing every 3 years like riprap does at a tremendous expense to NRCS. We were the only ones to put something out that was freestanding and maintained without settling for over 3 years. And we were the only success for doing that project. That's actually a 9.5 foot tall unit with a sacrificial base on it. Those units were later picked up when the permit expired and they were transferred to Lost Lake. You see up here in the inset picture, this was the start of the project done in 2015, I think, yeah, 2015. And we actually extended it further south with those same units. The water's muddy, but these units cleared up the water inside here. You can see the SAV being created. You could stick your arm in that water, you couldn't see your hand. That's how dirty it was. And you can see the marsh starting to rebuild its way out towards the wads. This is it just recently, December 2019. Okay, you can see how the marshland has built out to the wads. And this was the extension that we put on for those units that we took out from LA-16. So they're portable and adjustable. This is an infrastructure project on the Delaware City River, Delaware City Refinery. They were losing all their pipelines in here. So we came in, put these units in, and they're happy campers. We've accreted back most of the beach already. This is a project at E.G. Simmons Park, another segmented breakwater. The project here was design a system so that we could restore seagrasses. There's also a documentary on Facebook. So this was the first seagrass monitoring report we got. And after 6 months, we had a total of 2.5 or 2.25 extra acres of seagrass that had established there because we've attenuated the wave energy and it's not ripping up the bottom, and the beach and the mangroves all along here have all been restored already. So you get effective erosion control, you got public use assets where people can get in and out, enjoy it for fishing, the essential fish habitat, you get your ecological uplift. It's a minimal impact green technology. The Corps loves it. The DEPs love it. The Fish and Wildlife love it. It's a durable and stable design. Like I said, it's never moved for any of the hurricanes we've been through or storms, and it's extremely cost effective. And again, it's site specifically designed just to meet the tailored desires of the client. Here's some pictures of 6 months of growth on these units. And you can see all the coral growth and all the fish that are around these units in a very short period of time. 0.5 metric ton marine biomass, and that's a great offset for mitigation credits for DOTs, which are constantly doing projects but have to use carbon credits and mitigation offsets for projects that they're doing. And this is a report from the University of Queensland. It's on our website. You can see how almost half a metric ton of marine biomass on an annual basis. And we enjoy great relationships with Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Environmental Protection, Fish and Wildlife, DEPs, you name it. So we've passed all their tests. So with that, hand it over to Rick. Or Peter, excuse me.
Go ahead, Pete.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can see that okay.
Yep.
Good. And thank you all for your patience. I know it's been a long morning. I've certainly learned a lot and hope you all have too. I was invited really just by David and Kevin really just to talk about the whole concept of living shorelines. So I'm going to kind of talk big picture about living shorelines and also a few examples of what's actually going on all around us right here in Maine. And I live in Topsom, so and have lived in Maine for about 13 and a half years. But the concept of living shorelines means just that we're going to try to, as much as possible, work as a partner with nature, as opposed to what we pretty much did during the industrial era, was work with nature as the enemy or something that we were going to conquer. Living shorelines acknowledge that nature has the last word, so perhaps it would be wiser to actually work with natural systems as opposed to trying to conquer them. And, you know, we don't have to go any further than the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, they've been practicing living shoreline protection for about, roughly from about the year 500 BC. So that's a long time. That's, we're in our third millennium in the Netherlands working with living shoreline solutions. And so this is a country that's basically half below sea level, but they work with flexible systems. They've been doing this for about a millennium and a half. So pretty good people to pay attention to and to watch and to observe. And if you look at the early history of the Dutch, they worked with flexible systems. They worked with nature-based solutions because they had to. There weren't crushing facilities to make massive amounts of rock. There weren't ways to produce huge slabs of hard armor that could be put in. There weren't those kind of systems. They had to work with nature. They did, and they've been very successful at it. So in 2017, the Corps of Engineers here in the United States actually put out nationwide permit number 54, indicating that we should be looking at more nature-based solutions, plants and stones and sand and marsh plantings and beach formation, and just a few examples of some of the hows over on the right-hand side. These might be some numbers that you've seen before. What they tell us that we all really know is that due to climate change, that we are seeing rising sea levels. So these problems become more acute. And you couple that with the fact that we increasingly want to be closer and closer to the ocean. The ocean wants to be closer and closer to us. We've got a big problem of how we manage that. So here's where I think might be the most powerful message of all. Barriers virtually eliminate access. Barriers eliminate pretty much wildlife along the water's edge. They kind of go to, if you will, we go to kind of war against the intrusion of the ocean. In living shorelines, we work with those systems. And those of you who can remember it way back in the first presentation, which was a while ago from Pete Slovinsky, I loved his example talking about that dune recreation that was done in Saco. Fantastic example of working with nature as a partner, as opposed to trying to defy nature with things like seawalls and so forth. By the way, really important point, of all the options for shoreline protection, living shorelines are the least expensive. The most expensive are barriers, walls, and so forth. So that's quite a value proposition when you think about it. If we can offer something that is going to work better, be more sustainable, and cost less, that's a pretty powerful value proposition. And I don't care what you're buying or what you're selling, that's of high interest. But I think right here, this in all of the visuals that I can give you, this might be the most striking of working with nature, working with in ways that we have good beach access, but at the same time, we're maintaining our beach ecosystems. I like going on offense. I don't know about the rest of you, but defense is not a lot of fun. Offense is a lot more fun because you actually get to attack the problem. Now, there's several individuals here. I'm going to talk about two in particular. The guy on the extreme left is Dick Coleman. Dick Coleman was the head football coach at Princeton University all the way up to 1969 when he retired. He was the last Division I coach in the United States to have a single wing offense, and he was a big offensive guy. And I actually got to go to a game during his tenure at Dartmouth College. I grew up in New Hampshire and watched that single wing, was just fascinated by it. I've been drawing plays for the single wing offense ever since then. Never been used. The only coaching I ever did was on a sandlot team in the 1960s in my neighborhood, and we did use a single wing there, but I'm still drawing plays just in case. But he was an offensive guy. So was the guy on the right. That's George Patton, General of World War II. George Patton had a quote that said, "Show me an example of any war that was ever won by going on defense. It's about offense." And living shoreline solutions are really about going on offense. This is just a simple little array of some core fiber logs. But what we're doing is we're working with nature as a partner. In this example, here's some core fiber logs used in a marsh restoration application. So we're going on offense, and we're working with nature-based solutions. Back to Scott's, which attracted me immediately. When I met Scott probably about 10 years ago, I said, wow, here's a way to work with the waves, to actually use the waves to help accrete sand and build up beaches. And as a bonus, we're creating artificial reefs. Reefs are one of the most important places on the planet for habitat. I mean, there's some statistics, and I have them somewhere. I don't have them this morning, and I won't bore you with them. I'll just tell you this, that reefs support an inordinate percentage of all of marine life. And reefs are also disappearing, so that's a double whammy. So we're losing reefs, but at the same time, when we build them, they become powerful habitat. So this is really what's exciting about Scott's, again, and I think it's two things. His technology is going to bring us sand, and hopefully we can do some creative and productive things with that sand, but we're also enhancing habitat. And because his product is not building a barrier, because it actually is porous, there are some actually significant cost savings when you're going up against hard armor, which is even more enticing. Living shorelines create opportunities for community involvement, and you could Google this and go online and look at some examples. But communities come together and they work together on things like restoring tidal marshes, as you're seeing here. Volunteers, community involvement, education, letting people know what's going on around them, and having them be part of what's going on around them and helping them to contribute something positive to their community. Here's another offensive strategy. This is drift fence. What does drift fence do? It uses wind to collect sand. There's a lot of wind-driven sand that created these dunes in the first place. Drift fence actually helps us to capture this sand. And if you look at this picture, kind of look to the right and then look to the left, and you can see how much sand has just been accreted just by this simple little tool. Again, this is another offensive strategy. I'm going to show you a couple examples of projects, living shoreline projects that have been done in Maine. This one was done at Hamilton Beach on Chebeague Island, designed by an engineer from Freeport by the name of Barney Baker, installed by a contractor from Yarmouth, Robert Anderson. They use something called marine gabions here at the base and erosion control blankets and turf reinforcement mats up above to try to protect an eroding bluff. Very successful, but what I really like about it is the after. You look here and you can see the after, and what you're seeing is something that looks very natural. We've kind of beefed it up. There's some hard armor at the base and in the background here, but we've done this in such a way that we were able to vegetate it. And in my mind, I'm always thinking, can we get this back to looking like it did before we had the erosion, before we had the problem? Can we do this in such a way that brings us back there? And living shoreline solutions help us to do that. This was a project that I assisted with in Harpswell, Maine. The project was actually specified by Goral Palmer Engineering. And I worked with Will Haskell there. And this was well, this roadway in Harpswell obviously what was going on is where you're seeing those guardrails and so forth. This is a clam flat to the right. You had an eroding bank to the left. Something had to be done. So we installed an array of marine mattresses. These are basically flexible gabions filled with rock. And then we brought vegetation in to the top. Now, I wish I had a more current picture to show you, but what I can tell you is going on is organic matter is working its way into these gabion structures as we speak. And over time, we're going to, that rock and that plastic is going to go subsurface and disappear. And we're going to have a natural looking system that's protecting that clam flat on the right and that roadway on the left, and all the people who live down there and need that access. So these are just a couple of quick examples from Maine. Going back to Pete Slovinsky, Pete at the DEP was very involved in the installation of 3 living shoreline demonstration projects that were installed actually in 2020. These are marine gabions at Wharton Point on McCoy Bay in Brunswick. There was another site also at Lanes Island, and a third site that was also at McCoy Bay. But went in to those areas with some products that were either donated, as in the case of the marine gabions here, or were subsidized by manufacturers to help with this process of getting some of these projects in the ground in Maine. This particular one at Wharton Point, I went back and took this photo about 6 months after installation. I've been working right across the river from you folks at 2 sites with the University of New England and Dr. Pan Morgan. Our goal is to get living shoreline installations installed right on the campus of University of New England. And again, if you just look across the river, we're looking at where the place that we've been talking about all morning, but we're right across the river. So wouldn't it be exciting if we could set up some education around projects on both sides of right at the mouth of the Saco River? Very exciting. And such a beautiful area, such potential. And actually, Dr. Pam Morgan there is working with students right now on these designs and on monitoring these sites to get living shorelines installations on these 2 particular spots that are shown on this overhead shot here. So very, very exciting. And I think in the end, this is what we're looking for. I know it is. We're looking for help. We're looking for protection. We're looking for armoring, but we're looking to do it in such a way that we work with nature as a partner, not against nature as an enemy, and to have something that's attractive and sustainable. One of my favorite books, and if all of you have not read Design with Nature by Ian McHarg, you need to do that. So that's Design with Nature, Ian McHarg, write that down because I'm going to check. You all need to read that book. But Ian McHarg wrote this book in 1967, and what'll jump out at you when you get your copy and read it is that it could have been written yesterday. Insights that were at the time that he wrote them, a lot of people didn't even really understand what he was talking about. But what he was really telling us is that during the industrial era, we've attempted to conquer nature. Now we need to work with nature as a partner. And that book was recommended to me, I guess, about 10 years ago. I got a copy, read it, and it changed my life. And that's a moose. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Pete. Look, I know we're running beyond time, but we can keep the meeting open if people want to talk about anything. I have one question from Tim Harder. And Tim, I'm going to allow you to talk. And if you can unmute yourself, you can please introduce yourself and then ask whatever question you'd like to ask.
Hi, my name is Tim Harder, a resident of Saco. I've been attending the meetings and just following along for some time now. I just a quick comment. I just wanted to applaud the group. Hearing the working with nature solutions is great. It's refreshing. There's new ideas. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. I did just want to bring up one point that popped into my mind in a couple of these presentations, and that is the source of the sand. I know Rick specifically was talking about dredging, and there were some numbers thrown out. I think what would really add to some of these presentations is just kind of talking about the source of sand. Scientific studies have suggested that the source of sand coming down the Saco deposit is of the volume of, I think it's 16 to 20,000 cubic meters per year. And some of it is lost to the offshore environment. Some of it is deposited within the river. Not all of it settles in the narrows where we're talking about dredging. So I just think it would add to the presentation if when we talked about a dredger, which I think is a fantastic idea. I think it's a great piece to this puzzle. I just think it would add if we talked about how much we're dredging and we take into account the source and the volume that the source can potentially contribute. In other words, if we want to dredge 100,000 cubic meters a year, that's not sustainable. The river will not support that. So just a piece that I would like to see added, and a question that popped into my head while I was listening. So thank you, everybody, for your great work.
Thank you, Tim. Does anybody want to respond to that? I see a couple hands. Steve Dixon from Maine Geologic.
Thank you very much. This has been a great symposium, and I appreciate the effort that everybody's put into it, and it seems like a worthwhile conversation. I just had one quick thought that was related to the WADS and Plan 6 that came out in the Corps of Engineers Section 111 study. Talking to Mark Hable maybe 3 years ago or more, Mark priced out the cost of the stones for the spur jetty and only got one estimate from Rhode Island. So the cost of the rock work was extremely high, and it resulted in taking a lot of the project, the $26.9 million, and spending it on rocks and not on sand for beach nourishment. So just one thought and question that to put in the queue for some time is, could the WADS replace the rocks on the spur jetty in some form or other, and then cut the cost of and save some more money for beach nourishment or the amount of sand that can be brought in? So I'll just put that out there. I don't know if that would be a possibility or not, but Scott mentioned that, they've worked with the Corps before. Maybe the Corps could look at that as we go forward, hopefully without a whole lot more of modeling and efforts, but to kind of just replace the materials. So that was my one thought, and I'd just like to put it out there as a follow-up for perhaps another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
David, can I address that for a second?
Sure.
That's exactly what we're talking about here is when the PPA comes back. Bryan had given us some news from the city that the Army Corps wants to relook at costs before the PPA comes. Well, we want to be ready to show them that the living shoreline solution can replace the parallel 750-foot jetty and reduce costs significantly, upwards of $5–10 million savings. So exactly, that's exactly what we're proposing. And we don't want to hold up the PPA coming in. But if the city and Bryan are now saying that there's going to be a little time for them to relook at costs, then absolutely in that wait time, we're going to be talking about this. So thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Rick, go ahead.
I just wanted to address what Tim brought up, and his numbers are correct. From early reports that were done by University of Maine and so on, those are the numbers that they project for coming down the river. And any dredging operation that would take place within the Saco River would certainly have to consider what the accumulation was. And the idea of excavating an area just to have sand to put on the beach is outside the scope of what we're talking about. So thank you for that point.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Anybody else? Questions, comments, ideas? Pat, thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, David. We've got a great group here today, so I just wanted to throw out a not for future discussion today, probably, but maybe next time around or individually moving forward. The mouth of the Goose Fair Brook is a challenge for Saco and Old Orchard with regard to the sand movement. So we've seen the benefits of putting sand at the jetty and watching it migrate north. I do think a challenge we will face as we explore either more sand replenishment or is the effects on the mouth of the Goose Fair. So I do wonder if formalizing a channel with some living shore techniques, I don't, by no means am I saying we should create another breakwater at the mouth of the Goose Fair, but what could be done there maybe to help that channel be a sort of stable, that channel can move north or south or get completely plugged up by sand.
It has. Pete, can you comment on that? I mean, you're familiar with everything down here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Patrick, you bring up a good point, but I think one of the goals of whatever happens down at Camp Ellis is to slow down the northward movement of sand, still allow northward movement of sand, but slow it down. So you don't take 60, 70, 80,000 cubic yards of sand, put it out and have it move in less than a year up to Goose Fair Brook. That's the scenario for it getting plugged. It didn't plug with this last dredge of about 68,000 cubic yards, but it has plugged in the past after some dredges. So I think the idea of having a system in place that slows down the erosion rate in the Camp Ellis area and therefore the northward distribution of sand would mitigate the fact for even having to do something at Goose Fair Brook. It may not get rid of it completely, but slowing down that northward migration of sediment would certainly help with allowing Goose Fair Brook to stay open. So in a perfect world, I would say if everything goes right, you wouldn't have to do anything there. But you know, anytime you bring in a huge amount of sand and put it out in an area where the distribution of sediment is so quick, you may have problems with that plugging up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you, David. I know everyone is ready for lunch, so I will be brief. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming here today and sharing all this information, your wisdom, your insights. I would just like to say that Saco and Saco Bay are on the front line of coastal erosion. And as such, we're also on the forefront of finding solutions that work and increase our resiliency. I hope that the state of Maine sees a partnership with Saco Bay communities on finding solutions as a needed investment, not just for our area, but for the entire state. In addition to the direct benefit to the state-owned land at Ferry Beach State Park, discovering what works in combating coastal breach erosion here will inform the state on what will work up and down the Maine coast. I look forward to finding solutions together with all interested stakeholders, and hopefully we can keep things moving forward following this symposium. So again, thank you all.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you for supporting us and helping us with this too. Much appreciated. If anybody else has something to say, please raise your hand. If not, I think that's a good way to end it. I put together a mail list of all the panelists, so I'll gather up some links from Living Shorelines. If anybody wants copies of the presentation, we have those as well. So just let me know. And as I said, I'll send out some information so you can reach me as well. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to say thank you again to everybody on the call. Thank you to the delegation for all your hard work. Thank you to city administrator and staff. They've been great in doing the work to get us to this point. And again, thank you to our state representatives for helping to get us all on the same path moving forward. So, and then thank you to all the presenters and everyone with the interests, and thank you to the governor's office for being here. Again, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time. It's hard on all these Zoom calls we're having, and everyone's got a plate full of work that they're trying to get done. So again, thank you for being on there.
Thank you as well. You know, when I looked at the list of panelists, I was highly impressed, to say the least. I mean, we got a very strong group of people here, and you know, the idea is to keep everybody together, keep everybody up to date as to what we're doing, and you know, we need everybody's support to get something done. This is obviously something that's gone on for far too long. So thank you again, and I appreciate it. I'll follow up with you, and we look forward to doing this again soon. Thank you.
Thanks all.